Hi, I work in game design, and we're trying to get little kids to do things with via perceptual learning, and trying to really bang down the age as to what age we can get down to, the lowest age. You were talking about the different sensory things, and we're doing a lot of the visual part of this perceptual learning. I'm wondering how you're going through the other senses, if you're working in a sort of perceptual learning framework for sound and these other things.
So I always think about all the senses, and sometimes make a matrix. When I think about outputs, I think in terms of sound, light, and motion, because those are really the main categories of actuators that you can have when you're at least working with electronics and machines. But I'm not sure I understood the question.
Just about perceptual learning, those fine things that actually you're down to what the animal level of our brain works with. We don't need language or math or art to do. The pattern recognition part of our brain is really comparable in like an 18-month-old to about a dog. They would test a 3-year-old with a chimp. That kind of animal instinct part, that's the deeper part of us.
Right. Yeah, well, one big part of my process is user research. And so, being able to see how people react in real time, which is the important thing of actually building prototypes and having things in real time, rather than being a designer who's making a drawing and then saying this is what my product is going to be. And then what's wonderful about being at the University of Pennsylvania is I've been able to collaborate with I'm just starting to meet and collaborate with some great researchers there who are, experts at childhood learning and who, have the ability to kind of help me figure out what are good things. There's one woman named Michelle Johnson who's doing some interesting research with infants and actually, trying to put sensors into their play toys and then gather data so we can figure out what the reactions are.
Hello.
Hello.
I am having a great day. Thank you for sharing all this with us. When you were talking about Simon, you're talking about how you made a lot of decisions to keep it from going into this kind of uncanny valley place, right? And one of those decisions was kind of like, it has to look, well, one of those decisions was like, it should look like a person, kind of, right? And I guess my question is, have you come to an opinion about like what's so compelling about that? You were talking about how some things, like the MacBook, it looks like it's breathing, so that it's not human, and then there's these other things like, let's build a robot that looks kind of human. I guess my question is, do you have an opinion, have you come to opinion over your work about like what's so compelling about that? Should things look human? They don't have to look human. What's kind of the perspective you've gone through?
Yeah, so I've had the pleasure of working on these extremely humanoid robots where we're purposely doing eyes that blink and putting a lot of effort and motors and power into that. But what I've concluded then as a designer is that we need just very little. Like we need, like the Mac PowerBook light intuitively feels like breathing. And so, what I do is I think about what is human language in terms of gesture, and how can we take one of those gestures or a series of those gestures and put it into the object. But the object doesn't necessarily have to, the idea of humanese is very important. So what I'm trying to do is find a translation, but that translation does not need to be as literal as we think it is. So there's a great book by Don Norman, the cognitive psychologist, that's called Turn Signals, Other Facial Expressions of Automobiles. And he really talks about this. And it's something that designers have been doing for years just in terms of form, but what's really been exciting for me is that we have such a larger palette now of sensors and actuators to choose from that we're out of our reach in terms of being able to afford putting them into everyday objects. So I think that's where we're starting to see this new language emerging.
Hi there, thanks for coming. My name is Arjun, like Argentina but no Tina. My question to you is, so you talk a lot about creativity in the physical, tangible space, etc. But if you notice, a lot of software like Basecamp, enterprise software, they lack the sense of design. They lack any sense of visualization. Have you done any research? Do you have any insights into why that kind of there is no software, which is very visual and very creative for visual people. The reason I'm asking is that I'm actually building a startup right now in college for visual people. But when you look in the enterprise space, a lot of the things still look like they're from the 90s. So if you have any insights, that'll be awesome.
I don't know if I have any insight except to say that we're still in pretty early days of interface design.
Right.
So I think that there's starting to be more and more of an understanding. And, you know, again, the more that we see objects in the world that have an interface, that are not the traditional interface where we have to sit behind a mouse and a keyboard, the more that the audience starts demanding it.
Right.
And, you know, I think that's what's happening now is that, you know, a bit of this with the, you know, with the Apple Watch, I'm wearing a Google Watch, there start to be more gestures, and then those become part of, again, almost a vernacular that people who are not designers know about. And then, you know, there's almost a pressure to entrepreneurs and developers to know that, you know, people understand this language that's not based on mouse and keyboard. And
more touchscreens and gesture.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, thank you so much. Your work is very fascinating. I wonder what your opinion would be on as a futurist, especially on the social implications of what robotics will be, especially because, like, the cutting edge code writers today, and I'm not a designer nor a code writer, but the cutting edge folks are writing code that are writing code. You know, the best makers are making things which are going to make things, right? So, and we're not that far off. So there's a great little film, you may have seen it, called Humans Need Not Apply, where they kind of document, you'd love it, it's 15 minutes, it's brilliant, and it basically talks about how much, equating the automobile to the horse to what we think of robotics now as to autos, which Google car is just the first of which, right? So everything's going to become automated. So my question, not to ramble, is what do you think is going to be the implication on humans when we're no longer designing robots, when robots are designing robots, and what will the kind of social impact be, and what will our place be in relation to that?
Wow, that's a big question. I definitely see the future that you're describing coming. And, you know, I feel like there are still human beings masterminding the background. I'm very much of an optimist and a utopianist, if that's a word. You know, a lot of people talk about the singularity and how, you know, oh, they're going to take over and we're not going to be able to control anything and they're going to kill us. And that's not the vision I see. I see us just becoming more and more, in the robotics world, we talk about partner robots and having just more of a way that the robots can interact with us and learn from us, you know, or learn a job for us by working beside us and learning to enhance our job, you know, rather than necessarily taking it, although that's another whole big conversation. You know, I think that what's happening is just lending to more of a sophistication. Anybody who's used, you know, Siri or you know, Google voice recognition knows that we're still a ways from it being totally natural, and it takes a lot of artificial intelligence, and then, you know, a lot behind the scenes. There's a lot going on with cloud robotics, where the robots are all kind of collecting data. You know, something like picking up a glass of water is actually very tricky. You need to know that it's glass, you need to know where to hold it, you need to know the orientation, you need to know how hard to hold it. So you know, there are some researchers that I'm friendly with at UC Berkeley who have been, you know, studying ways that how can we have all the robots kind of like pool their resources to say, hey, I saw a glass before, and this is what a glass looks like, and this is what we need to know about holding glasses of water. So I guess the short answer is I think it's good, and it will, you know, mean that we as humans can be more human because we can talk to the robots in a more sophisticated way.